In this lesson, let's talk about addition and subtraction of algebra. So a very important rule that we need to know before we do addition or subtraction for any algebraic expression is that we can only add or subtract like terms. Okay, so what are like terms? So x and x are like terms. So if I have 5x and 6x, they are both x, right? So they are considered like terms. But if I have x and y, they are no longer like terms. Similarly, if I have 5x squared, x squared versus x, they are unlike terms. Okay? So what is x squared? We'll talk about more about it later on. So for now, just remember that we can only add or subtract like terms. So if it's x, we can only add or subtract anything with x together. It cannot be x squared, x cubed, and so on. It must be x. Okay? If you have x and y, you cannot add or subtract them. Just think about it. If I have 4 oranges and 5 apples, 5 oranges and 5 apples. Okay, so if I use x to represent oranges and y to represent apples, okay, the number of, so I have x oranges and I have, sorry, maybe let me change it. So if I have 4 oranges and 5 apples, and I call oranges x instead of writing everything out, and I call apples y. So how many oranges do I have? I still have 5 oranges, right? Okay, I don't have 5 plus 5 because apples are not oranges and oranges aren't apples. And similarly, I only have 5 apples, right? Because apples are not oranges and oranges aren't apple. So in other words, you can only add or subtract like terms. Similarly, if I have 5 oranges and I ate 2 oranges, how many oranges are left? Okay, so I have 5 apples and 5 oranges. Let me write it this way. So if I'm interested in orange, I don't need to care about apple, right? I'll still have 5 apples, but the number of oranges will become 5 minus 2 equals to 3. So I have 3 oranges left. Okay, I cannot take the 5 from the apple. I must take the 5 from the orange minus the 2 from the oranges, because I only can subtract oranges from oranges. I cannot subtract oranges from apples, right? They are different. So in other words, when we are dealing with algebra, that means we are using letters to represent something. Okay, we cannot add or subtract unlike terms. We can only add or subtract like terms. So with that being said, let's try this example. So for example, I have 3x plus 2x minus x. So all of them are in terms of x. So they are considered like terms. So you can think of it as I have 3 oranges, I add 2 oranges, and I minus 1 orange. So total I have 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 minus 1 is 4. So I have 4 oranges and I use x to represent oranges. So I have 4x. Question 2, I have 3x plus 2y minus z. So x, y, z, they are unlike terms. So being unlike terms, can you add or subtract them? No, you can't. So 3x plus 2y minus z is essentially 3x plus 2y minus z. We cannot further simplify this. Next, I have 3x minus 2y plus 2y plus 5x. So I can add or subtract like terms. So the x and the x can go together. So I can take 3x plus 5x, which will give me 8x. Next, y and y, they are like terms. So I can take minus 2y plus 2y. So minus 2y plus 2y is equals to 0, right? You can think of it if y represents oranges, minus 2 oranges plus 2 oranges, there will be 0 oranges. So this answer, there will be 0. So you don't need to write it because 0y is the same as 0. So for number 3, the answer is simply 8x. So in short, what I want you to take away from this lesson is that we can only add and subtract like terms. And like terms in algebra just refers to exactly the same. If you have x, you can only add or subtract things with x. Okay, x and x squared on x cubed, they are unlike terms. You cannot add them together. You can think of x as a small apple, x squared as a big apple, and x cubed as a mega big apple. You cannot add them together. All right. Similarly, if you use a different letter like y or z, they are considered unlike terms. Okay, x, y, z, they are also unlike terms, and you cannot add or subtract them. So you can only combine or add or subtract like terms with like terms, add or subtract like terms and like terms.